Mr. Parsi was one of the people who actually founded it. So it's such a pleasure to have you on. Trita, thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
My pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Well, wow, what a whirlwind. This 14-point plan. I just got it, by the way. I've been reading through it and enjoying it because it's really mind-boggling to think that, I hate to say it, but it's almost like Iran is getting more than they even expected, or that I expected they could possibly get out of a deal like this. They're in a much better condition now than they've been in the last 35 years, it seems to me, if this all comes to fruition.
Well, first point, they are in the best position ever to have a final negotiation with the United States to resolve all their problems. And I hope they take that advantage instead of what they many times have done in the past, have shied away from actually ending this enmity. And I know it's emotional and there's a lot of different baggages on both sides, etc. But we have seen that this has been so destructive for everyone except the Israelis, who have benefited from it and fueled it. But I would also say that it's important to read this MOU as a framework and a parameter of a potential deal. We have no idea what the final deal will look like because this MOU does not say how far the Iranians will go in their nuclear concessions. What it does say is that the US is willing to put all sanctions on the table. And a lot of people have essentially interpreted that as if the US is just going to lift all sanctions without knowing what it gets in return. That's not what it's going to be. It's just that Trump is signaling, I think he's absolutely right. All of these sanctions were supposed to be leveraged. They were ostensibly supposed to be traded away for nuclear concessions. And unlike the previous administration, and I strongly supported the JCPOA, who never put primary sanctions on the table, for instance, never put all of the sanctions on the table. Trump is saying, I'm putting everything on the table. Yeah. I'm willing to lift everything, but obviously I'll only do that if you give me X, Y, and Z on whatever nuclear files that they're focusing on. And we don't know what the Iranians will give. So as a result, we don't know what Trump will give. But he's flagging that he's willing to put everything on the table. And an analogy I would use is that when some people are like, oh my God, how can he lift all of these sanctions? First of all, you don't know what he's going to get for it, but it seems to be like an ideological opposition to lifting sanctions. And francely, that's what exists here in Washington.
We should love more sanctions.
People love to impose sanctions. Exactly.
Yeah,
60% of the U.S. but 60% of the world's population is under some form of U.S. sanctions. That's not a good thing for them or for the U.S. It's like
Moscow,
going to
you can't walk into a building in Moscow to pee without possibly violating a sanction. But it's true.
But just imposing all of these sanctions and then not wanting to use them in a negotiation is kind of like going to Vegas, winning a lot, having all of these chips, but refusing to cash it in because you rather have the chips than the cash. Who does that? Doesn't make any sense. But I think it's important to understand this is framework, this is parameters. We don't know what the final deal is going to look like.
By the way, you know what we ought to do, or I'm going to do, because the guy's coming under attack now, and I've attacked him as well. Look, Trump is unethical in many ways. He's not moral. He's not honest. He's a showboat. He's not the smartest man in the world, not the most studied man in the world, all of those things. We know that, right? Kudos to Donald Trump. It takes a lot of courage to walk away from a fight you're losing. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but it's true.
Yeah. And look, I wrote about this extensively, a pretty long piece, or not too long of a piece, but I wrote a piece on my Substack last night about this, in which I'm pointing out, first of all, I'm very disappointed to see that many of the Democrats are doing the same type of bad faith attacks on the deal as the Republicans did against the JCPOA. And particularly since some of these Democrats were actually really good on this issue, it's disappointing to see this. But beyond that, I think it's a mistake for them, because if their attacks contribute to this MOU falling apart and we go back to war, guess what? This war is no longer just Trump's failing war. It's now also your failing war, because you helped make sure that it continued instead of ended. So I think it's a very foolish thing for many of them to take this position at this point. But beyond that, this is how we end up in these endless wars, because this political opposition in Washington makes it politically more costly to end a losing war than to continue it.
Yes.
And then the president just makes the decision, you know what? It's too costly for me to end this. I'm just going to continue this fight, lie to the American people that victory is just around the corner. I mean, Trump has been saying that on this war. The U.S. said that through several administrations throughout the Afghanistan war. We were constantly told that victory is around the corner. Just give us another 6 months. And then the Washington Post papers, the Afghanistan papers, revealed that the U.S. military knew all along there was no victory around the corner, but they just kept on adding this. And it was actually Trump that negotiated the end to that, but it was ended up being implemented by Biden. But this is how we end up having these 20-year-old wars, because there's so much silly partisan opposition towards actually ending a failure and an approval of continuing a failure. That is absolutely upside down. And I wouldn't necessarily, it hurts me to say I want to give him kudos for ending
Yeah,
this war, given the fact that he did the huge mistake of starting in the first place. But I
exactly.
appreciate the fact that he's breaking this Washington pattern and actually ending something that is bad, rather than just kicking the can down the road and hoping that the next president will have to take that decision.
He's so weird in this way, isn't he? I mean, he's the guy who, of all presidents, perhaps in my lifetime, has been more beholden to Bibi Netanyahu and the Zionist Israeli point of view. I've never seen anybody embrace it like he has.
Mm.
And now, listen to this. Artie, do we have a soundbite from last night when he blasts Netanyahu for what he did in Lebanon? Play that.
And too many people are being killed. And you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody, because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah, that I can tell you. Without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Now, I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled themselves with Lebanon and with Hezbollah.
There you go. I mean, that's pretty direct language that
Very
I've
direct.
not heard from any other U.S. president in the past.
Imagine Biden saying that.
No.
Right? Apparently, he didn't even say it privately. Yeah, no, look, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, what he's doing with this, he's pushing back publicly against Israel and he's questioning their methodology, which means that he's going after the legitimacy of how they're doing things. He's not questioning their right to defend themselves, but he's actually questioning how they're doing it, which is something that changed under the Biden administration, in which we were no longer allowed to question how Israel was doing things because of October 7th. October 7th just magically justified whatever the Israelis wanted to do. It wasn't like that before. Not saying that the US has not been overly supportive of the Israelis, but there was a different balance. That changed under Biden. It continued under Trump, and now he's pushing back against that. But there's more to it. Some of the other comments that he gave about the Iranians may come across as just superficial or the kind of off-the-cuff things that he sometimes says that may not have much meaning, but they actually had profound meaning. He said that the Iranians are rational. He said that they're pleasant to deal with. I doubt that he actually thinks that. He said that they care about their country, which is very interesting, because what he's doing there is that he is destroying the three key pillars of the Israeli narrative about Iran that they have pushed in Washington for more than 25 years, which is Iran is irrational, it is ideological, and it is suicidal. But he says Iran is rational, they're pleasant to deal with, and they care about their country. That means they're not suicidal. Now, why did the Israelis push for that narrative? If you believe this narrative, that the Iranians are ideological and irrational, that means that neither deterrence nor diplomacy will work with them. If on top of that you say that they're suicidal, it leaves you with only one option. You have to take preventive war because they're going to attack you because they're suicidal. So you have to attack them first. So this is a narrative that you create because you want to corner the United States into having to go into war with Iran. He is destroying the pillars of that attempt to corner the US. It's not an off-the-cuff comment that he gave. It was very calculated.
There's so much here that does so much for Iran if, as you say, they take the opportunity. I think I made my notes. I'm going to number 6. This is subpoint 6. The United States of America undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive, mutually agreed upon plan with at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, this is an investment development that will come mostly from the Persian Gulf partners, which is fascinating because what he's doing is he's bringing together an entity that was prior to the war separated. There's another one here that does kind of the same thing. I think it's, number 11. Number 11, he says, the United States of America undertakes to make available for the use of frozen restricted assets of $120 billion. No, that's the frozen asset thing. No, the other one that I like, I got myself a little bit lost here, I think is number 5. The Islamic Republic of Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no surcharge for 60 days. After that, the Islamic Republic of Iran will conduct a dialogue with Oman to define the future administration of maritime services in the Strait of Hormuz in discussion with other Persian Gulf states. So in number 5 and in number 6, I think that I just read to you, what the MOU does is it brings together the Persian Gulf states with Iran, where there's been a rift in the past. This is
Not just that it's
crazy.
been a rift. It's not just that it's been a rift, Rick. What you have is a 40+ year American policy to organize half of the region against Iran and essentially the other half, and to divide the region. Isolate and contain Iran has been the organizing principle of the United States. This is the inverse of that. You have now a situation as a result of this war that these GCC states have understood the containment of Iran eventually leads to war. And in that war, the American security umbrella will not protect you. It is not efficient or reliable. So they have no choice but to move away from that. So where are they going? They are taking steps. It's going to be difficult. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of problems on both sides. But they're taking steps towards having a new approach, one in which they integrate with Iran economically, but they will also balance against Iran. But there will be a different balance between the containment and the integration. And they will use the integration as a security buffer. Part of their security is to make sure that they're integrated with Iran so that the cost of war will be too high for both sides. This is what the European Union did after Second World War, the Steel and Coal Union. They integrated their economies to make these world wars, the worst wars that the humanity had seen, as difficult and costly and impossible as possible. And it provided 7+ decades of peace to Europe. Now the Middle East is going in the same direction. Ironically, when Europe is walking away from this and instead is favoring war much more than it did before. This is a good thing. It's a good thing for the United States. It's a good thing for Europe. For the region.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, if they shoulder their own responsibility for their security, if they integrate and become more stable, that will be to the benefit of everyone. And this is part of the reason I'm so upset to see people complain about this investment fund
yes,
as if it's a gift to the Iranians. This is something, first of all, the Iranians have suffered $300 billion of war damages, so they need reconstruction. And the very same voices that go out there and say that we're standing on the side of the Iranian people, which I think they should when the Iranian people are being repressed by the Iranian government, are now against rebuilding a country that has been ravaged by war that would deeply benefit the people of Iran. Now they're against that. It's so unbelievably hypocritical.
Well, let me tell you why they're probably against it, because they're smelling the same thing I'm smelling. When I saw this, right, mutually agreed upon plan of $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But then when Mr. Trump was asked, where's this money going to come from? He says it's not going to come from the United States. So where's it going to come from? It's coming from an investment fund. Pardon me, an investment fund. Sometimes us Cubans try to talk too fast. From Gulf partners that will remake and rebuild Iran. What he's saying is giving carte blanche to create a situation where a country like Saudi Arabia will now directly do business with Iran. They're going to be investing in Iranian projects. And this is scary for Israel, especially.
Absolutely, this is the nightmare for the Israelis, but it's very good for the U.S. Look, when the Iranians and the Saudis did the normalization deal through the help of the Chinese and the Omanis and Iraqis, their mediation. What happened there was that it was supposed to be Saudi investments in Iran. MOUs were signed. None of it materialized because of US sanctions. So what this is saying is that if this deal is struck and that both sides do give the concessions they need to give, agree to the compromises they need to agree to, then the US will lift the sanctions that allows the region to integrate itself with Iran. Iran is no longer outside. And as a result, it will not guarantee peace, but it will make it dramatically more costly and difficult to go to war. It's a fantastic thing. Now, I do think that if it also lifts the primary sanctions, which I suspect will be necessary, that will then also allow American companies, if they want to invest, to do so as well, whether it's through that fund or through other things. That is also a good thing, because it's a very good thing if it will make the durability of this deal much stronger than the JCPOA. The JCPOA did not allow any American companies to do the business with Iran with the exception of Boeing, which then also meant that when the next president, ironically Trump, wanted to rip up that deal, it wasn't particularly costly. It had no negative repercussions for the US economy because the US economy never benefited from that deal. So if you want to anchor a deal and make it as sticky as possible, these are the things you need to do. It's not charity to Iran, as some of them are accusing it of. It is actually the smart thing to do to make it stick for your own sake.
Last time you and I talked, I remember we said that when this is all said and done, there's a real possibility that there's going to be a stronger tie, or maybe perhaps a more open tie between, for example, the Gulf states and China and Russia, because they're seeing that they need to be more diverse. What I never thought was that instead of getting closer ties with China and Russia, they'd end up with closer ties with Iran. I mean, I thought that would be like step 5 down the line, but here we're seeing the possibility that this could be actually step 1 in this plan. Let's go back to number 11. I think that is important. I mentioned it when I got mixed up, but the United States of America undertakes to make fully available for the use of the restricted funds and assets, basically the frozen assets of the Islamic Republic of Iran. My reading is it's up to like $120 billion. Here's Trump talking about this. And he says the reason he's doing it is because if he doesn't do this, no one will ever want to use the American dollar and the de-dollarization will start in earnest or continue in earnest. You got that, Artie? Let's play it.
A lot of their money, and we have their money. We have taken their money. It's not our money. It's their money, and we froze it. At a certain point in time, I guess we're going to have to give it back. You know, if we didn't give it back, nobody would ever invest in the dollar again. If you took their money, because I thought about it, you know, I'm not the most perfect person. I said to Scott, why do we keep their money? What the hell are we giving it back to them? But, you know, like people from lots of nations, some nations we don't agree with, they have their money. The dollar's become very strong under me.
There you go. Yeah, I thought about maybe just keeping the money. What the hell? I like money, and I'm not a perfect person.
So I actually wrote about this on Substack yesterday as well, because I saw that people, a lot of mainstream media were kind of losing their minds about this, thinking that he's making this up. And I remember that Jack Lew, when he was the Secretary of Treasury under Obama, gave a speech warning exactly about this. And I'm just going to quote that from this Substack piece. He said, he warned that excessive use of sanctions could encourage countries and companies to avoid the US financial system and the dollar. And this is the quote: the more we condition use of the dollar in our financial system on adherence to US foreign policy, the more the risk of migration to other currencies and other financial systems grow. That's exactly what happens when the US freezes Russian money or Iranian money, because suddenly holding dollars, first of all, countries will no longer want to trade in dollars as much because you run the risk of suddenly have your money frozen. It took 4 days for the US to freeze all of the Russian money. Iranian money has now been frozen for 10 years. And that migration is not just something that will happen from countries that are on the naughty list of the United States. It will scare a lot of other countries as well, particularly mindful of the fact that they have a view of the US of being increasingly unstable and unpredictable.
I wonder why.
Yeah, wonder why, exactly. So if you keep on doing this, you will scare people away from the dollar. And this is what Jack Lew warned about at the end of the Obama administration, because the Obama administration really took financial sanctions very, very far. Now, it went even further under Trump 1. But this is the same thing as if the Iranians were to start, closing and opening the Strait of Hormuz willy-nilly. They've only done it when they face an existential threat. They didn't do it in 24 when they were attacked. They didn't do it in 25 when they were attacked. They did it this year because it was an existential threat. But if they going forward start just, over minor disputes, close the strait, rest assured, there's going to be plenty of pipelines being built in order to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. So if you overuse that leverage, you will lose it. It's the same principle here. Trump is absolutely right. But when he says it, it's very disorienting for people when he makes sense.
Well, and he almost sounds like a anti-hegemony guy, like Trump
exactly.
is an anti-hegemony. I don't think he knows he's being anti-hegemony, but he's being anti-hegemony when he says stuff like this. You know what I'm surprised at? I mean, I read through this and I kept looking for something here that would be, blatantly, even if not real, but nonetheless, to make it look like it was a real win for the United States. And I can't find anything they could have even dropped little things in there, like saying, okay, you're allowed to charge in the future when you maintain and manage the Strait of Hormuz, but you have to be able to allow dollars to be used for companies going through instead of Bitcoin or the Yuan or whatever the hell you're using. Stuff like that they could have stuck in here just, to give people a sense that there's some wins, but I don't see any of it. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't, because we have to be frank. The U.S. didn't win this war.
Yeah.
Now, if it had won this war, yes. And this is also part of the reason why people are like, well, this is not that good. This is worse than it was before the war. Yeah, no shit. What do you think was going to happen? If you lose a war, you're going to get a better deal, better terms for the deal. I think there's a way to get a better deal, and that is to make the deal bigger. That's by putting all of the sanctions on the table and get more concessions from the Iranians than they offered before, because you're offering more. That formula was always there. And it's been American inhibition, the same fear we talked about before. The fight that Obama would have to have in Congress or politically in general if he actually had put primary sanctions on the table. I spoke to the Obama administration extensively at the time about this, and they were not willing to do so because they were afraid that the political backlash would be just too big. Even though they fully understand, they would have gotten more nuclear concessions from the Iranians if they had.
Let's get big picture now, because you're such a perfect guy to talk to about this. You know what I'm thinking? I'm asking myself and asking you, what's the takeaway here from other countries watching this? Iran is walking away, if this thing all comes to fruition, with a pretty good deal. And what did they do? They stood their ground. They defended the little guy. They fought back. They built a strong defense, and it worked. And they told the West where they can stick it. What's the takeaway for Russia? What's the takeaway for China? What's the takeaway for any country that kind of feels put upon by the West after watching this? I'm wondering. Well, I'm wondering if the Russians should hire Arachi. It's like, good work for us because we want our sanctions gone too, dude. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Some different conclusions for middle powers than for larger powers or great powers like China and Russia. For the middle powers, the conclusion is, okay, many of them have tried to appease Trump, and that didn't work. But when they have stood their ground, which Europe did on Greenland, for instance, but hardly on anything else, it has paid dividends. And that this is what you have to do, and you have to be willing to pay the price for it. Now, at the same time, I think we have to be very frank. What the Iranians offered in Geneva was a very attractive deal to the US because they were trying to avoid a war. They didn't want this war. They were not asking for this war. And frankly, I think they are themselves surprised by how well they performed. They did not know how well they would have done or how successful they would be in closing the strait. So, and frankly, who could have known at the end of the day? And who would want to take the risk? No one is dumb enough to go up against a superpower like the United States willingly. This is only something that was forced on the Iranians. And it's the irony of it, of course. And the Iranians managed to weaponize geography in a way that really had been difficult for anyone to envision. In all of the different conversations I've been with in US government circles, no one thought that they were going to be this successful. Neither did the Iranians in terms of closing the straits. And the methodology is very different today than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they would have just mined it and it would have taken the US 2 weeks to reopen it. Whereas this time around, it's the combination of mines, drones, rockets, all of these different things, and the entire coastline of Iran, not just a couple of islands. This has a different conclusion for middle powers than it has for the great powers. It means that middle powers actually can, with new technology and the weaponization of geography, be able to resist the greatest superpower, the United States. This has a different conclusion for the Chinese. And this has a different conclusion for the Chinese, because the Chinese also then need to recognize that if Taiwan, for instance, had not relied on the US's military, but had gone the Iranian strategy of an asymmetric confrontation with China over Taiwan, if war ever were to come, the Taiwanese may actually perform better. But that's not the direction they've gone. But some, again, I'm not saying that the Taiwanese are going to change their tactics altogether. I don't know enough about Taiwan, but the point is, this is a reminder for all great powers that with technology and clever use of geography, this strategy can be replicated against them as well.
You're so great. Thanks for joining me, man. What a great
You
conversation.
so much. Really appreciate it.
You're just a really smart guy, and you're fighting for the right cause, and that's one of the things. Look, if you have to be honest with yourself about Iran, and I know there's people who hate Iran, and there's probably even people in Israel who to this day want to just destroy them and do whatever they want, and I hope it never comes to that point. But you got to respect the fact that Iran, they did something my dad taught me as a kid. You always got to fight for the little guy. If you're in the schoolyard, you see a bully picking on a little kid, it's your job to go over there and fight for that little guy, fight for that little kid, And that's what Iran is doing. I mean, Iran has made it their business to get involved in the horrible things that Israel has done in Gaza, and now the horrible things that Israel has done by bombing Beirut. And while the rest of us talk about it and sound really smart and then feel good about ourselves and thump our chests, they've said, no, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to do something about it. You know what? Damn, man, that's admirable.
Yeah. Though I do have to, we should talk about that in a different show. They're doing it for their own strategic reasons as well. There is an ideological dimension there. There is definitely sympathy, clear sympathy for the Palestinians, etc. But the history is a little bit more checkered than the somewhat romantic picture that you're putting forward there, because at the end of the day, no country does charity. Everyone is just looking out for their own interests, and so are the Iranians.
Call me Mr. Simplistic then, or Mr. Romantic. Like I said, I'm Cuban, you know? I like those long songs. I listen to Frank Sinatra on the way home from work too. Love you, man. What a great
Thank you, man.
conversation.
Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.